All right, so if you've clicked on this video, you've likely been on every single diet in the books, or you've been on a diet for as long as you can remember and you're just so tired of it. You probably know that with every single diet you go on, you probably erode and damage your metabolism more and more each time. And that every time you go on a diet, you're more likely to actually regain that weight back and some on top of that. Now, if this sounds like you, my guess is you're probably feeling really sluggish, really tired, you're over dieting, you're finding it way too hard to start another diet and stay on it, and you fall off the diet bandwagon, and you're really looking for something that's going to make you feel vital, strong, and healthy again. Well, if that's the case, you are in the right place, because in this video, we're gonna break down the truth around slow metabolism, what actually happens when you diet, and how you can repair your metabolism after years and years and years of dieting. All right, now before we dive in, let's explore what metabolism actually is. So metabolism is defined as the collection of complex chemical reactions that occur in our bodies 24/7 in order to keep us going, to keep us alive and moving. So our metabolism is actually quite dynamic. So factors like our hormones, so if you're menstruating every month, this might be an example of how your hormones might influence your metabolic rate and actually increase the metabolic rate. Hence why you're probably a little hungrier around that time. It can also, for example, be affected by physical activity if you do more or less, right? Because that directly influences your muscle or your lean mass, which is a key driving force of your metabolic rates. So let's break down our total daily requirements for the average individual by looking at this diagram here. So if you'll see at the bottom, around 50 to 70% of your daily requirements are there to cover your resting metabolic rate, as we just mentioned. And if we move on top of that, we'll see what is called the thermic effect of food. So this is actually the energy that's required to digest your food, right? So if you are chewing and then you swallow your food, your stomach is going to mush it all up into what we call chyme. It moves down the digestive tract, it does its thing. So that actually requires energy. This might explain why sometimes when you're hungry, you actually get a little colder, and then when you eat food, you actually kind of warm up, right? So you are actually producing heat. This might also affect why, for example, in summer months, you might not really be aiming for, let's call it heartier foods. Rather, you might go for quote unquote lighter foods because it's actually going to prevent that heat production, right? So it's a clever way that your body has your back, and it's actually going to be taking this into consideration to make sure your body stays cool. Now, if we move up, we then see what's called NEAT. So this is what we call the non-exercise related activity thermogenesis. So this is accounting for any movements that are not necessarily structured exercise. So this might be fidgeting, it might be walking from A to B to just do your thing. It might be brushing your teeth. So it's not necessarily structured activity, but you do that most of the day. And that accounts for typically around 15% of our energy requirements in the day. And then we move to the very top. So most of the time we might think exercise, is so important, which it is, and it obviously lends to incredible health benefits. However, it actually accounts in the average individual for around 5% of your daily requirements. Okay, so of course for an elite athlete, this might look very different in terms of ratio. And we might see that, for example, the resting metabolic rate can go up to 70%, and then the exercise may actually take up a lot larger portion of the day compared to the NEAT. So if you're really listening, you may have caught on a little earlier that actually muscle is the active tissue in the body. So what does that mean? Individuals who have higher lean muscle mass actually burn more at rest, right? So that means, for example, elite athletes who exercise and have a lot more muscle mass percentage compared to fat mass might burn more whilst doing nothing compared to the average individual. So in order to help build a healthy and faster metabolism, as it were, we need to also think about how can we optimize our resting metabolic rate. Now, if we go back to the chart, you might have noticed that exercise takes typically about 5% of the day, right? But remembering that loops directly back and influences our resting metabolic rates. Now you might be thinking, great, Ari, I'm just gonna exercise more and just go to the gym every single day and oh my gosh, it's gonna be great. Whoo, slow down. 1 second. That's not it, right? like I said, our metabolic rate, metabolism, is a lot more dynamic and complex than you might think. So there are a few other things that we might need to talk about first before we draw any conclusions. Now, to really get to the bottom of it, we have to understand the impact that dieting or any form of restriction actually has on our metabolism. Why is it so difficult every time we go on a new diet? It becomes harder and harder and harder to lose weight, and we gain more and more and more weight, right? This is what we call weight cycling. And what we actually see is that weight actually increases every single time we go on a diet, or at least in the long term, when we zoom out, that's the pattern that we see in the research. And now what we actually know is that various studies demonstrate that when you start to restrict the number of calories you're putting into your body, your metabolism will begin to slow down over time. So technically, a diet just means a way of eating, a pattern of eating. However, the diet industry has usurped that, and now it's really become synonymous with restriction and or semi-starvation in the literature. You see, the thing is that your body's unable to discern the difference between full throttle famine and semi-starvation, aka dieting. Your body doesn't know the difference. It doesn't perhaps realize that, I have a pantry full of food that I technically could eat, but I'm choosing not to, right? And so there's a part in the brain that actually gets activated called the hypothalamus, and it actually starts initiating the fight or flight response, right? It is perceived as a threat, right? So ring the alarm, oh my gosh, I'm not getting enough food. How long am I actually gonna have to sustain myself without enough energy or fuel, aka food? So perhaps what I need to do is to reduce and conserve, go into hibernation mode, slow down the system to make sure I have enough energy to survive, right? Your body has your best interest. It really is trying to protect you at the end of it all. Now, if you want to learn more about the starvation response and what actually happens in the body, I go into greater depth in one of my videos linked in this description below. So do feel free to explore that a little bit, because it is really helpful and really empowering to understand your body. All right, so I'm gonna get you to go way back to your cellular biology 101 class in high school. And if you remember, if we're looking at cells, right? We talked about animal cells, plant cells, whatever types of cells. And what we talked about were the different components of the cell. One of them was actually called the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria are powerhouses of the cell, and they are key players in cellular metabolism. What the research has actually shown is that diet-induced obesity actually harms these organelles, primarily in the liver and skeletal muscle, aka lean tissue, that is really important in our metabolism. So that means you might be doing the same amount of exercise as Joey over there or Linda, but you're not actually going to have the same metabolic impact, given that these organelles might be damaged and harmed. Now let's put this into context, because of course, naturally we're talking about diets and what impact that has on our metabolic rate. But effectively, when you go on a diet or you just consume less energy than your natural resting metabolic rates, your body's gonna conserve and reduce its metabolic rate to below the amount of energy that you're consuming. So if we take, for example, MyFitnessPal or any diet that's actually out there that you might get started on, there are so many, so I won't say names, but effectively, they usually start at 1,200 calories, right? Just a little side note, that's the amount of calories a toddler needs. I know, it's quite shocking. Now, the average resting metabolic rate for a woman is around 1,400 or 1,500 calories per day. And for a man, it's typically around 1,700 calories per day, 1,600 to 1,800. That's really an average. Of course, that can change due to so many different factors in terms of physical activity levels, genetics, right? So many different components there, but that's an average. And just to give you an idea, that average is much higher than a 1,200 calorie diet that is typically the starting point for most diets. Of course, there are some that even get you on 800 calories of food a day. That's really harmful. So think about that shock to the system, right? Your body's trying to survive, and it requires, let's say, 1,500 calories per day minimum to just breathe and have your heart rate, your liver detoxifying, your brain thinking, all of these things. And yet we're again feeding it below that level. And so what ends up happening to our metabolic rate is that it then slows down and not only goes but to the 1200, it might actually fall below because you're still doing your day-to-day activities. So your body wants to make sure it has enough to sustain you and to keep you alive. So how do you re-optimize your metabolism after years of yo-yo dieting? Now I know it might feel a bit hopeless, but do not worry. There is a solution, I promise. Now I'm going to break down 4 different things that you can start doing today to help rebuild that metabolism so you can feel vital, feel healthy, and find your happy weight. The first, eat adequately. Reestablishing a healthy metabolism means trusting your body's natural hunger and fullness cues so that you can honor your own needs. Research shows that consuming regular, balanced meals is associated with weight management and metabolic health. To maintain an energy-efficient metabolism, your body needs an adequate supply of nutrition throughout the day. In other words, we need to give your body the building blocks it needs to start repairing this muscle tissue. And yes, that means balance. This doesn't just mean having all the protein in the world. This also means having adequate carbohydrates, fat sources, right? Vegetables, fruit. There is so much variety to be had, and making sure there's enough of each of those food groups will then help your body utilize those building blocks and repair itself. Number 2 is move your body in ways that feel good. So as you begin to re-nourish yourself and eat enough throughout the day, moving in ways that feel good will support new muscular growth and health. Number 3, have enough rest days. Now, although physical activity is great for your body and your mind, overworking yourself will negatively impact your metabolism if you already are in a calorie deficit. So remember to take rest days. They are imperative for long-term health, and they are an important sign of a healthy relationship with movement. And number 4 is say goodbye to the diet mindset. Start focusing on health-promoting behaviors instead, and make note of the intention behind your behavior. Start building your self-worth independent from a number on a scale. Now, if you're not sure where to start, make sure to grab my free diet breakup audio guide that is linked in the description below. Now, in this free video guide, you're going to take the very first step you need to take to make peace with food and your body and to start repairing that metabolism of yours. It's going to do this by exploring the deeper reason why you are struggling with food, to understand the biology of diets and why they aren't working for you. It's also going to offer you journal prompts to mend a diet heartbreak and affirmations so you can heal and move on. Now, as always, it is such a pleasure to connect with you every single week. If you thought this video was helpful, make sure to hit the like and hit subscribe if you feel called to. And if you think this could help a friend or a loved one, be sure to share it along, as this would help me out so much. Now, until next time, chat soon. May you live in health and alignment.